Can I pose take questions 1 to 5 together? I last met the DUP leader, Ms Arlene Foster, on the 15th of October when we discussed a range of issues, including the current political situation in Northern Ireland and Brexit. At our meeting, I emphasised the Government's full commitment to all aspects of the Good Friday Agreement and our continuing determination to secure the effective operation of all its institutions. We discussed what could be done to get the institutions of Northern Ireland up and running again. I reiterated to Ms Foster that the Government wants to put a political system in place that can secure an agreement on the operation of the devolved institutions, and that we will continue to engage with the UK Government and the political parties in Northern Ireland to seek progress within the period immediately ahead. We also discussed Brexit, including the negotiations that were ongoing at the time on the backstop to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. Ms Foster explained her difficulties with the backstop, while I explained why it's considered necessary by Ireland and the EU. As the House is aware, the withdrawal agreement agreed between the UK Government and the EU includes the important backstop provisions. Unfortunately, that agreement has not been ratified by the House of Commons, and the House will be aware of the current situation in Westminster. The Government has had discussions with a number of DUP representatives in recent months. For example, the Taoiseach met with Arlene Foster and other DUP members in Belfast on the 10th of January as part of a round of meetings with the leaders of all political parties and with a range of civil society groups in Northern Ireland. The Taoiseach will continue to engage with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the leaders of all political parties in the weeks ahead.
The great position we are in today in relation to Brexit would be much better if the Northern Assembly and the Executive were active. Instead of the DUP promoting its hardline pro-Brexit approach, I think the majority in Northern Ireland would be in a position to pass resolutions and other measures supporting the current withdrawal agreement. History, I think, Taoiseach, will not look kindly on the fact that Northern Ireland was left voiceless because its institutions were collapsed over a heating scheme, or indeed that the inquiry to that very heating scheme has revealed an incredible story of the involvement of background forces who operated to an unknown agenda. To be honest, Taoiseach, the situation yesterday confirmed yet again that the lack of any relationship outside of increasingly rare meetings is an important part of the barriers we are facing. There's no doubt about that now. Last year you said, Taoiseach, that you expected a significant initiative to get underway to get the institutions re-established. You then said that this initiative would wait until after Brexit. Can you indicate to me what is the current status of this initiative? Given the seriousness of Brexit for the Good Friday Agreement, when will you be producing the promised analysis of areas for action which need to be addressed irrespective of the nature of Brexit? For example, the human rights architecture of the agreement specifically includes the direct justiciability of European-level rights in Northern Ireland's courts. I raised this as an issue as early as July 2016. What discussions have you had with the British Government on this specific matter? As it's a purely bilateral issue, Taoiseach, I think you'll agree it's entirely separate from the withdrawal agreement, so you might enlighten me in that regard.
I think it may turn out to be a historical tragedy that, in fact, the people who voted to remain in Northern Ireland have not been represented, and that the Executive in Northern Ireland has not been reconvened. I think we all understand there are political difficulties, but I think the consequences of Brexit are so great that the political difficulties need to be addressed and overcome, and I think they can be. And what I want to ask you, Taoiseach, really is, in view of the difficult circumstances that now arise, what proposals, if any, do you have to meet with Arlene Foster, to reach out to Arlene Foster and the DUP, who are representatives of a large segment of unionist and pro-Brexit sentiment in Northern Ireland? Do you have plans to meet her on a regular basis? Your last meeting, you indicated there, was October, middle of October. That's actually, in the context of the very important events which are happening, is actually a long time ago. Have you, for instance, had an opportunity to engage with any of the Commons MPs of the DUP Nigel Dodds specifically, but any of the other MEPs, to engage with them and to establish their concerns around the backstop. Have you sought a bilateral meeting? And have you engaged with the DUP concerns about a no-deal exit and its impact on Northern Ireland? And in the event of a no-deal proceeding, have you and, say, the IDA given consideration to how, in particular, northern companies may be facilitated by having a presence south of the border in the Republic, in order to try and ease very obvious difficulties that may arise with a hard Brexit?
Deputy McDonald, please.
Karen Corla. Well, just as previous speakers, and perhaps more so given that we are a national organisation and Sinn Féin represents a very substantial portion of the electorate north of the border, I, like others, am very anxious that the institutions of government be re-established. I'm also a realist, and we also have a mandate from the north of Ireland, and we know that there is no appetite, let me repeat, no appetite amongst Northern nationalism or progressives to re-establish the institutions on anything other than a grounded and sustainable, full-blooded power-sharing basis. So it's not that we have minor political difficulties. And if there's anybody in this House who is seized by that delusion, you're on the wrong track. The issues at play are significant and long-running. The issues at play, by the way, Ceann Comhairle, I would remind people, I believe we had arrived at a fair accommodation last February. That didn't happen. The DUP didn't deliver. I regret that, but that's the circumstances that we're in. I met Arlene Foster in January. We had a very frank and friendly conversation, but it's absolutely apparent that the DUP have not moved 1 inch or 1 iota, nor do they intend to. And I wish to share, and for the purpose of the record of the Dáil, if nothing else, to identify why that is the case. That is because both governments, Theresa May's Tories and Leo Varadkar's government, have acquiesced with the DUP agenda of delay. Delay for Brexit, delay while they hide at Westminster. That's why we have had no substantive process, despite having been promised one. That's why you can meet until the cows come home. If there is not a real political pressure on the DUP to do business, then they're not going to do business. It is as stark as that. So, Taoiseach, what is your plan? And you, after all, as I say, are the person in charge. What is your plan to get the institutions back up and running?
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Eamon Ryan.
I would reiterate my call, I think I made here several weeks ago, that we would get the institutions back and running. It is intolerable that at this most historic sensitive time, where the issue of Northern Ireland and the Irish border is absolutely centre stage in our politics, in the politics in the UK, in European politics, that the only person, active politician in the representing the majority opinion in the North is Lady Sylvia Herman in the House of Commons. And the absence of the Assembly, I think, is inexcusable at a time when we may need it to manage a crash-out Brexit that could not be left to civil servants. So I would encourage the Taoiseach to do everything in his powers to see those institutions return. Can I just briefly ask, because we're all, I imagine, scratching our heads after the votes in the House of Commons last night, and I'm thinking, what should or could our approach be? And one of the options, and just to put it to the Taoiseach, in any negotiations he's going to have to do or discussions he's going to have with the British Prime Minister today or in the coming days, is to maybe go back even a year and 2 months to that initial agreement in December 2017, where the Irish border would be maintained open. There might be some regulatory and other checks in the Irish Sea, per se, to allow us to do that. Now, that may not be to our advantage in the sense that it might hinder East-West trade. It mightn't be the UK's disadvantage, because they may actually like the customs arrangement that they agreed to in the withdrawal agreement. But it would be one way, it seems to me, of responding to the British Prime Minister if she comes, where we maintain our insistence around maintaining our border, but suggest that as a flexible mechanism. Now, the DUP will not like that. They stopped it, the UK Prime Minister having agreed it on that Monday, was it the 5th of December 2017. But given that she and her officials signed off on that with the European negotiating team, it might be one suggestion to come back to the British government in what's going to be very fraught 2 weeks. And I just want to put that idea to the Taoiseach.
Taoiseach, we've just under 5 minutes now for a response.
Ceann Corll, I am, of course, very aware of the votes that took place in the House of Commons last night, and I'll speak to Prime Minister May by phone again this afternoon. We scheduled a call yesterday, and that call is taking place this afternoon. In light of the position the UK government took yesterday to support the Brady Amendment, and in light of the 2 votes that occurred last night to pass both the Spellman Amendment and the Brady Amendment. As far as the withdrawal agreement stands, the European Union, including Ireland, stands by the withdrawal agreement, including the protocol and backstop relating to Ireland. As President Tusk said yesterday, we are not offering a renegotiation, and a renegotiation is not on the table. There's no plans to organise an emergency summit to discuss any changes to the guidelines, nor is there any pressure to hold one. So I think the message from the European institutions and the European Union from yesterday was abundantly clear. The withdrawal agreement is not up for renegotiation and is not going to be reopened. In relation to the 2 amendments that were passed last night, I think it's important to acknowledge that there were 2 amendments passed last night. The first was the Spellman Amendment, which says that there should not be a no-deal exit by the UK from the European Union. And it is in the hands of the UK government and UK Parliament at any time to take the threat of no deal away. They have the authority to do that, either by revoking Article 50 or seeking an extension to Article 50. So that Ireland and the European Union are not threatening no deal. The UK government and the UK Parliament have it in their authority to take the threat of no deal away at any time that they wish to do so. In terms of the Brady Amendment, it speaks of alternative arrangements. I do not know what those alternative arrangements are. We've been down that track before, and I don't believe that such alternative arrangements exist. And that is why we have the agreement that we have now, because the only way I believe that we can avoid a hard border, physical infrastructure, checks and controls in the way foreseen in the original December agreement is through full regulatory alignment, to use the language of that December agreement. In terms of the Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive not functioning, I think it's really regrettable that they haven't been in operation for the last 2 years. Absent an Assembly and Executive functioning, parties do what parties do, and they've taken party positions that have largely appealed to their base. I think if the parties had been in the Executive holding ministerial office, they might have been more willing to think about what was best for Northern Ireland business, what was best for Northern Ireland agriculture, what was best for Northern Ireland as a whole, rather than taking positions that very much derive from party policy. In terms of any initiatives, the Taoiseach has been in touch with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland only this week, but it's still my view that we need to focus on ratifying the withdrawal agreement, creating some certainty around Brexit, and perhaps after that there's a space then to re-engage with the parties. But fundamentally, the Assembly and the Executive cannot function unless the 2 major parties are able to agree, the DUP and Sinn Féin. And the governments can facilitate, can help, can cajole, but we can't force those 2 parties to come to an agreement. And those 2 parties, DUP and Sinn Féin, I understand now hold the world record for failing to negotiate a coalition agreement and to form a government. And that is not something I think either party can possibly be proud of. In terms of rights, as we understand it, the UN or the EU's, the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, will continue to apply to all of the UK, including Northern Ireland. The UK is leaving the European Union, it's not leaving the ECHR. However, that of course may change. Those people in Northern Ireland who have Irish passports and are Irish citizens will continue to have the rights that EU citizens have, and that is the right to travel freely, to reside and work in any part of the European Union. And that, unfortunately, is something that UK citizens may not have in a few weeks' time. However, EU citizens and Irish citizens in Northern Ireland will continue to have those rights that come with European citizenship, the right to live, work or study in any part of the European Union. In terms of rights that are linked to residency as opposed to citizenship, such as Erasmus, participation, the European Health Insurance Card, the withdrawal agreement proposes that that continues throughout the transition period, and that even though people in Northern Ireland would not be in the EU anymore, they would continue to have access to the European Health Insurance Card, continue to be able to participate in Erasmus, for example. And it's our intention as part of the Future Relationship Treaty to negotiate a position whereby EU citizens living in Northern Ireland would still be able to access all of those different programmes.
Question 6,